It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
That's me. I'm Evan Roberts. Welcome to Rico Brogna. We are doing a Rico Brogna live for those consuming it live on Thanksgiving Eve. If you are spending time listening to the Rico on your Thanksgiving, we say thank you and we say happy Thanksgiving. Of course, you can rate, subscribe, and download Rico Brogna. We give you at a bare minimum, and rarely have we done the bare minimum, but at the bare minimum, 2 Rico Brognas per week. But throughout this offseason, it feels like Hoff and I have kind of hit 3, sometimes 4 Rico Brognas a week. And that trend will continue, especially when there is breaking news throughout this Met offseason. A lot of things to cover. We will talk about the Hennessy Cabrera signing by the New York Mets to a minor league deal. We will react to the Blake Snell contract with him going to the Los Angeles Dodgers on a 5-year, $182 million deal. We will react to the latest on Juan Soto, and we will read a ton of your emails. But there's only one place to start on this edition of Rico Brogna, and that is honoring the namesake himself. As we record this live on November 27th, I do understand most people will be listening on November 28th and November 29th, but on November 27th, that was Wednesday of Thanksgiving week, we honor a sad day in New York Mets history. Because 28 years ago, on November 27th, back in 1996, the New York Mets made a decision. They decided to trade the name of this podcast himself, the great Rico Brogna, to the Philadelphia Phillies for 2 garbage relief pitchers. Toby Borland. Remember Toby Borland? Geeky-looking, tall guy. I wouldn't call him a side armor, but he was basically a 3/4 right-hander. They got back Toby Borland. He stunk. They also got back Ricardo Jordan, a left-handed reliever from the Philadelphia Phillies. Here's what makes the trading of Rico Brogna so sad, but also so understandable. The Mets got John Olerud that same offseason, and I acknowledge how great John Olerud was. John Olerud was an unbelievable Met for the few years he was here in 97, 98, 99, and then, of course, he left as a free agent. And they got him for Robert Person. So as much of a heist as it was in getting John Olerud, we gave Rico Brogna away, the great Rico Brogna away, for 2 garbage Philadelphia relievers. So I get Olerud. I get that the Mets had a great 3-year run with John. But to trade Rico Brogna for that's why that trade still bothers me. Now, I acknowledge they did a great job upgrading at first base, but it still bothers me that it was Ricardo freaking Jordan and Toby Borland. And we allowed the great defense of Rico Brogna, the great personality of Rico Brogna, the solid offense of Rico Brogna to go to the Phillies. So it still bothers me, I have to admit. Now, if you are watching this on YouTube, for those listening in your regular podcast form, I will describe this for you. But we added something to the Rico Brogna studio, and that is a beautiful picture of Rico Brogna. Me and my dad were at a Met Cub game at Wrigley Field back in, obviously it had to be 1995. That was the year. 1995. I think I wrote about this in my Mets Bible. But we had these incredible seats. We were sitting first row at Wrigley Field. It was actually Jason Isringhausen's major league debut back in 1995, July of 1995. And my dad, knowing I was a big fan of Rico Brogna, took this wonderful picture of Rico Brogna that Rico would then autograph. So that is now on the Rico Brogna studio set that we record. So if you consume the Rico on YouTube, you can now stare at that beautiful swing of Rico Brogna behind my, left shoulder? No, right shoulder. But anyhow, let's get to the baseball. Let's start off with Blake Snell. I wasn't surprised that Blake Snell went to the LA Dodgers, but I think sometimes throughout an offseason, when the news finally comes down and there weren't a lot of rumors saying it was close to happening, so it just kind of happens, there is that level of surprise. But when you think about who the Dodgers are, when you think about how much money they are willing to spend, all the free agents they buy, and you also think about their need. Their need is a top of the rotation arm. The Dodgers have a lot of uncertainty throughout their rotation. They have a lot of guys that are good in theory, but they don't pitch enough. Tyler Glasnow is really good. He doesn't pitch enough. Clayton Kershaw is a walking injury at this part of his career. Shohei Ohtani is coming off Tommy John surgery. Yoshinobu Yamamoto doesn't pitch a lot. He missed a lot of time last year. And obviously, Jack Flaherty is a free agent. So there were a lot of questions around the Dodger rotation. So for them to go out and sign one of the aces, whether it was going to be Max Fried or Blake Snell or Corbin Burnes, is not a surprise. I will give you my reaction to this. I explained this a little bit on Evan and Tiki, so if you heard the show on Wednesday, you will hear this explanation again. If you haven't, you'll hear it for the very first time. I'm not scared of the Dodgers adding Blake Snell because the Dodgers are already really, really, really good. The Dodgers are one of the rare teams in baseball that I would tell you are a mortal lock to make the postseason. I don't say that about every team. I wouldn't say that about the Yankees. I wouldn't even say that about Atlanta, and I wouldn't say that yet about us. There are good teams. There are teams you expect to make the playoffs, but I'm talking a mortal lock. Like lightning would have to strike for the LA Dodgers to not make the postseason. They've been in the postseason every single year since 2013. They've had years where they've won 111 games. They've had years where they've won 107 games. They are coming off a down year, quote unquote, a down regular season where they faced so many injuries. They still won 98 games. They still won the NL West. And oh yeah, by the way, they got hot at the right time and they won the World Series. So the Dodgers, to me, unlike any other team in baseball, because I don't say this about any other team in baseball, they're going to the playoffs. So I say that to explain that adding Blake Snell, who, yes, in theory, if he picks up where he left off in the second half of the year when he came back from his injury, was one of the most dominant pitchers in baseball. And Blake Snell won the Cy Young a year earlier. That, yeah, of course he strengthens the Dodger rotation for the 25 starts that he makes, or whatever that number is. But they're going to win the NL West either way. And real talk, Met fans, no matter what we do during this offseason, the LA Dodgers will go into the regular season as favorites in the National League. And they will go into the regular season, no matter what, as a team with more talent than us. Doesn't mean we can't beat them. Doesn't mean they're going to get to the World Series. It just means that they're going to be the team to beat. It is what it is. So the Dodgers adding to what already is the team to beat, to what is already a mortal lock to make the postseason, okay, they're basically in the division series. And I don't throw that around a lot. I understand the beauty of Major League Baseball, the you never know in Major League Baseball. The LA Dodgers, though, over the last decade and a half, have been the biggest regular season But here's the other caveat to the LA Dodgers' mortal lockness to make the postseason and probably win the National League West. They are also 50-50 that they're going to get hot at the right time. This is the same team that won 111 games and lost a division series in 4. They won 111 games and then proceeded to win a playoff game before getting knocked out. So if we all accept that the Dodgers are loaded anyway, and they're going to win the NL West anyway, now we're just talking about the playoffs, right? That's what we're talking about. We're talking about Blake Snell making potentially 2 starts in an NLCS or a National League Division Series. Okay, let's talk about that. He's obviously good. No one's going to deny that. But a couple of things have to happen. Number one, he actually has to be healthy. He needs to be ready to go and make said postseason start in the National League Division Series or the National League Championship Series, or dare I say the World Series. Is that going to happen? Maybe, maybe not. He's getting older. He has an injury history. He's had 1 year in the last 6 in which he's made 30 starts in a year. Now, that's just the regular season, but who knows? Maybe that injury, maybe that hip issue that he always seems to have pops up in September. I don't know. That's number one. Number two, let's get this straight about Blake Snell. This is why I've never been fully in on signing Blake Snell. He is a 5-inning pitcher. And that's okay. The Dodgers know that. Kevin Cash knew that. And he won a Cy Young doing that. So what am I supposed to be afraid of? The 5 1/3 innings he's going to pitch in the one postseason game that he pitches in a best-of-5 series, potentially against the Mets? Is that what I'm supposed to be like, oh my God, I can't believe the Dodgers added Blake Snell? And that's not to say they shouldn't have added Blake Snell. Good signing. Understand who he is. Understand he's a 5-inning pitcher. Understand that he walks the world. Understand that he's only getting older and you just gave him a 5-year contract. Eyes wide open. You know the risks. Okay. The Dodgers took that risk. They have enough money to take that risk. But again, remember who they are. Remember how good they are. And remember that what are we really talking about? So if Blake Snell stayed with the Giants, that's a bigger threat to the Mets. Believe it or not, it is. Why do I say that? The Mets are no lock to win the NL East. They've got to make the playoffs. Blake Snell being on the Giants makes the Giants better over the course of 162 games. Blake Snell's impact on the Dodgers in 162 has very little impact on us, Met fans. What, the one start he makes in the regular season? Okay, I'll give you that. But over the course of 162 games, over the course of the 2025 starts, it makes no impact on us. They're going to make the playoffs. Blake Snell going to the Phillies is clearly more damaging to us. Blake Snell going back to San Diego is more damaging than us. Blake Snell literally going to any other team in the National League besides the Dodgers is more impactful to us based on what could happen in the regular season. In the playoffs, yeah, he may make his 1-2 starts, but that's all we're talking about. So we'll get into the deferrals. We'll get into the contract, but I want to make that clear just as a Met fan that I didn't lose sleep over Blake Snell signing with the LA Dodgers. The rich got richer. The better got better. Okay. They're already great. They're already loaded. And they're already one of the biggest pitching staffs with the most injury questions. And that's why if I were the LA Dodgers and I did have $182 million to throw out with a lot of it deferred and a lot of it in a signing bonus, I don't think Blake Snell would have been my first option. But that's their decision. And I wish them the best of luck. In terms of the deferrals, in terms of the signing bonus, we got to quit crying about this. The LA Dodgers are circumventing MLB rules. They're not. The LA Dodgers are doing what we should be doing. That's the reality. The LA Dodgers are taking advantage of their wealth, and they're telling free agents, obviously Ohtani was the big one, but even before that, with signing Freddie Freeman, with re-signing Mookie Betts, with extending Will Smith, we got a ton of money. And sure, we'll push some of that back so it brings down the CBT, so it brings down the tax that we pay. They're not doing anything underhanded. They're not doing anything that Steve Cohen couldn't do. They're not doing anything that the Yankees couldn't do. So I'm sorry. I'm not going to join in on this hand-wringing of, oh, my God, the Dodgers, they're so ridiculously corrupt. They're not corrupt. They're smart. And here's the thing about what they're doing. So there's always been deferred money. That's not new. In fact, we as Met fans should know that better than anybody. Bobby Bonilla Day was deferred money. The Wilpons were the Guggenheim before the Guggenheim was the Guggenheim. I only say that sarcastically. Obviously, their deferrals to Bobby Bonilla and Brett Saberhagen, not exactly the same as deferring, $9 billion to Shohei Ohtani. But deferred money has always been a part of baseball. The Washington Nationals were very big on deferred money. In fact, if you take a look at what they still owe Max Scherzer and what they still owe Steven Strasburg, you'll see that they defer a lot of money. Have the Dodgers taken the deferral game to new heights? Of course they have. But much like when Steve Cohen bought basically the Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander contracts, both bought a lot of it off to get prospects back. Remember when that happened? And we said, wow, look at Steve Cohen using the power of the wallet to buy us prospects. And we all celebrated it. He was creative in how he used his wealth as part of a pseudo rebuild retooling that the Mets did when 2023 was a disaster. And we all commended them on that. Every other team can do that now. You can learn from Steve Cohen and say, hey, that's a great idea. I'm a big market team. I'm having a bad year. Even if I'm not a big market team, I have a billionaire owner. I can actually enhance my return on these players because I'm going to pay off a big part of their contract. There's nothing against that. Steve Cohen did that. We all celebrated that. The LA Dodgers, obviously it's not exactly the same, but are using their wealth and using creativity to bring down their CBT, which is what this does, and also push back the bill many, many years. Everybody can do that. If the Mets wanted to sign Blake Snell, and it doesn't appear like they were very interested in Blake Snell, why? Because they're pretty smart. They could have offered a contract like that. So to my fellow Met fans, we'll get to some of your emails because there are people complaining about it or different creative ideas. The Dodgers are doing nothing wrong. Do I like the LA Dodgers? No, they're a rival now. They beat us in 6 in the National League Championship Series. They are clearly the team we're going to have to get by. And like I said earlier, no matter what we do, no matter what this offseason looks like, they're going to be the team to beat. But what they've done with deferrals and what they've done with signing bonuses is great. I have no issue with it. And I would ask our owner, the great Steve Cohen, who's a loyal Rico Brogna listener, by the way, I would say, Steve, if the Dodgers want to play this game, play it better. If the Dodgers want to try to circumvent the CBT by giving a massive, massive signing bonus, then give a bigger signing bonus. If the Dodgers are going to defer money until 2050, then defer money until 2070. Play their game. We're allowed to play it too. So between Blake Snell makes the Dodgers unbeatable, give me a freaking break, and the Dodgers are circumventing rules and it's so bad for baseball, give me a break on that one too. You know what's bad for baseball? Billionaire owners that don't spend money. And I'm talking to the Oakland A's and other franchises that pretend to be their small market teams. That's what's bad for baseball. Billionaire owners who spend money on their team and try to win. I like that. I respect that, even if they're our rivals.
So the one thing I have to say, and I respect everything you said, I total agreement. Blake Snell going to the Dodgers, whatever. They're spending the money. It's fine. My biggest issue is what other player in baseball is going to take a $700 million contract and defer 90% of it till later on? Nobody else. So that's like a cheat code right there. And then on top of it, like the bonuses, I feel like it's something that like doesn't really happen in baseball. Is that something that's brand new? I feel like bonuses don't really happen like that.
Well, okay, so the Shohei Ohtani thing is unique, and I agree with you. I don't think any other baseball player is ever going to agree to that kind of excessive deferrals. But the other deferrals, the ones that Freddie Freeman got, Mookie Betts got, even the one that Blake Snell got, yeah, they're more normal. And yeah, if a player is willing to do it, and that's what it comes down to, the player needs to be willing to do it. Shohei Ohtani, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's that he always wanted to go to LA, which it feels that way. Like the flirting with Toronto was never real. Maybe he was willing to go back to Anaheim, but it was really Southern California. That's it. Maybe it's that he's got so much freaking money, which you could say about a lot of these players anyway. I have so much freaking money. I'm just going to defer the crap out of it so I can help this roster be built better. Kind of like the way NBA players may turn down the max contract, take a little bit less to try to help get other players under the salary cap. So I agree with you. The Ohtani thing is unique for him. But again, the Dodgers didn't do anything wrong. Like, it's merely taking advantage of the situation. And, you know, in this pursuit of Juan Soto, I don't know what Juan Soto really wants. We'll get to it in a few minutes, why I'm getting pessimistic about Juan Soto. I'll address that. But if he wants to be a New York Met, could you go to him and say, hey, defer money because this is going to help us get Corbin Burns or whatever? You can try. Doesn't mean the player is going to accept it. But everybody can do it. Everybody can try. The Ohtani thing, a little bit of a cheat code, I agree, because he's unique. But what are you going to do about it? Or just spend more money. You know, you're Steve Cohen. You're a billionaire. Fine. Outspend the spend would be my answer to it.
No, listen, and I get that, but it's impossible when somebody wants like when Otani never wanted to come to the East Coast, so
Yeah.
we're out on that, and they basically went above and beyond to cater towards each other, and they worked together.
Okay.
We need to find a guy like it's almost impossible to find a player like that. Like if Juan Soto is looking for every last dollar now as soon as possible, we know that, and you're going to talk about that sooner or later.
Right, but I guess my point is, all right, yeah, you want to find someone who's willing to do what Otani did. Good luck. I don't know if that guy exists.
Pete
Otani
Alonso.
Otani may truly be the unicorn for that reason. I hate the Dodgers. I do. I don't like the LA Dodgers. I don't want to ever see them win another World Series. I think their fans are obnoxious too. So I have no reason to defend them, being honest, that all they're doing is stuff we can do that I hope we can do. Now, as far as Juan Soto is concerned, every time a story comes out, and I do this with any story where there are leaks, even the stuff going on with the Jets, the story around Woody Johnson and Aaron Rodgers' future, story like that comes out. And one of the things I always think about is who is supplying that information and why? Like, why are you leaking that information? So every day, it seems, over the last 2 weeks, we've heard more and more and more and more about the Mets and Juan Soto and how the Mets are in the driver's seat. And, they're going to offer $50 million a year more than anybody else. Whatever cockamamie story you want to come up with, the Mets, the Mets, the Mets, the Mets. Now, my question that I've been starting to ask myself is why? Why and who is leaking out that the Mets are so in the driver's seat? Are the Mets being cocky? Is Steve Cohen leaking that out? Doesn't make sense. Why would you do that? It really sets the bar way too high. You put yourself in a spot where you better sign him, and if you don't, you're the biggest idiots in the entire world, right? So it wouldn't make any sense for the Mets to leak out their confidence or their cockiness or how much they're in the driver's seat to getting Juan Soto. So you start to think, well, who's leaking it out? Well, the answer is Scott Boras. To me, Scott Boras always leaks things out. And you ask yourself, well, why is he leaking this out? And that in conjunction with the Red Sox stuff that's come out about how aggressive they're going to be and how they're selling the Dominican to Juan Soto. Look at David Ortiz, look at Pedro Martinez and Manny Ramirez and all the great Dominican stars that played in Boston. It really feels, I'm not telling you I have an inside source telling me this, I'd be lying. This feels like a used job. It feels like everything Scott Boras is leaking is trying to motivate Hal Steinbrenner to offer more. That's the way it feels. Now, I hope I'm wrong. I want the Mets to sign Juan Soto. And I was talking to Sal off air about this, and Sal said, Evan, I think you're coping. I said, I'm not coping. If we don't get Juan Soto, I'm going to be pissed off. Nothing is going to make me feel better. So my opinion of what I think I'm seeing is not coping because it ain't going to make me feel better. I'm not rationalizing. I'm pissed. I want the Mets to get him. But it feels like every single story is being leaked as a motivation to get Hal Steinbrenner to offer more money. So it almost feels like Juan Soto has told Scott Boras, I want to go back to the Yankees. Now work your magic. Get the Mets involved, which they already are. Get the Red Sox involved and just get that number as high as possible. And assuming it's close, I'll go back to the Yankees. Now that's the caveat, assuming it's close. So everything I'm feeling can still lead to him being a Met. And that's if Hal Steinbrenner walks away at $650 million. The Mets are at $750, and Boras and Soto say, well, we're going to take that. And that's okay. That's happened in Met history before. In fact, the best example I'd give is Carlos Beltran. The Mets were doing everything they could to get him. The Yankees were right up against the luxury tax, and they felt they didn't need Carlos Beltran. And remember, Scott Boras and Carlos Beltran went to the Yankees and said, hey, if you could just get to, and I forget the exact number, $105 million, $110 million, we'll go. Yankees said no. Fine. Beltran chose the Mets. So it is still possible in my theory we get him, but doesn't it reek like everything that's put out there is to get Hal to upper his offer? to move it up a little bit. I mean, use the Red Sox and use the Mets. Those are the two best examples. And I got to give credit to Negative Dan. I read this on the air, and Negative Dan was very happy about this. But Negative Dan sent, and he does some great research, old tweets from the last 3 years where you see that same overconfidence coming from reporters about the Mets signing someone. And I'll give you who the players are, and you'll know how it ends up. Mets are heavy favorites for Trevor Bauer. Bet the farm the Mets are going to end up with George Springer. The Mets are locked in on Kevin Gausman. Like, there's a lot of examples of it. And then the best part was, the last one was, Mets have talked to Max Scherzer, but they're not confident. And, of course, that's the guy they end up with. So I know that this is all making us crazy, the Juan Soto stuff, because you hear an update every 5 minutes. You're not sure what to believe. Really, the only thing you really should believe is what Scott Boras is leaking to us, and then trying to figure out, why is Scott Boras leaking that to us? So the latest that Scott Boras leaked to us, besides Mets, is that Hal Steinbrenner upped the offer. That was the John Heyman story from Wednesday night. Hal Steinbrenner, in the second round of offers that are being put out there to Juan, they upped it. So you ask yourself, okay, well, why is that out there? That's out there to get the Mets and the Red Sox to respond. And then we'll get a story in a few days. Boy, the Mets are oh, what an offer. And that'll attempt to get Hal to up his offer. So my confidence level right now in signing Juan Soto is lowered. And I think the only thing that can help us is Hal Steinbrenner tapping out. Because the vibes I'm getting from the way things are leaked is that Soto prefers to go back to the New York Yankees. Now, I'm sure Pete Hoffman disagrees with me. I'm sure he will tell us, don't worry, he's coming to the Mets. You're being too negative. And by the way, I'm not being negative. I'm describing what I think is going on. And I'm not telling you Hal's definitely going to stick there with Steve Cohen. So it is still possible this is a Beltran situation and we get him, but it feels like this is about upping Hal Steinbrenner.
Evan, you're going to hate that I'm going to say this, but I kind of agree with you. Because
no.
Every time, like, think when Steve Cohen took over the team, every transaction they made, there was really no move. There was no rumors that led up to it. Like the Lindor trade just happened. The Scherzer move just happened. The Verlander move happened. Starling Marte happened. Kana happened. Like, go down the list of moves that have been made. There was no build to it. It just happened. So whenever there's like real quote unquote rumors attached to it, I feel like that's just all speculation to, like you said, to build up the price, to try to drive the price up. So I am concerned like you, because I think the Mets do need Juan Soto for many different reasons. And it's not just Juan Soto. Like, let me just clarify this. Juan Soto is not the only move the Mets can make this season, like off season. That's one of the many moves they need to make, but that needs to happen regardless, because it puts them on a different pedestal. It just does.
And it also gives us a cornerstone franchise player in the prime of his career. You know, Francisco Lindor is a franchise player. He is towards the end of the prime of his career, just based on age. Juan Soto is 26 years old. So it's not just the prestige of getting him. It's not just what he does to the lineup this upcoming season. It's the whole shebang. It's what you're getting for a very long period of time. So I think most of us agree that it's very important to get this done. I think the way Steve Cohen, if he hears me and he says, I agree with you, I think everything, Evan, you're saying is right. I think that we are being used to try to get the price up on Hal. The way you answer this is you leave no doubt. And I said that about Yamamoto. I said that about Ohtani. This is a little bit different. You have to make an offer. And I don't know if you do that now, because maybe that's not the best negotiating, but you have to leave there no doubt between your best offer and the Yankees' best offer. And then what you force a player and an agent to do is take considerably less to go to their preferred destination. And the reason why I'm not scared of something like that, the reason why I don't say, oh, but don't you really want the guy to be there, is A, Carlos Beltran. I gave you that example. But the other example I'll give you is CC Sabathia. CC Sabathia preferred to go to the West Coast. He did not prefer to sign with the New York Yankees. And those West Coast teams never made big offers. The Yankees did. And the Yankees made a massive offer. And so CC Sabathia took the Yankees offer and then fell in love with New York. And it was a match made in heaven. So I'm not worried about, but why would you want someone that doesn't want you? First of all, if he wants the Yankees, it isn't a city thing because it's the same city. It's a organization thing. It's a comfort with what they almost accomplished. It's the stadium or it's Aaron Judge, whatever it is. It's not as if he doesn't want to play in New York City. So you've got to factor in, can the guy play here? So the retort by Steve Cohen to my theory, if it's true, is just blow him away. That's it. And I've said this before. I know the Mets had a great year, so we've stopped saying this as much. But last year I talked about the Met tax and how for the Mets to get big free agents, they're going to have to grossly overpay, and that's okay. Well, this is a scenario where grossly overpaying and making this contract even more absurd than the rumors, I think is worth it and maybe the only way you get said player. And I hope that's what the Mets do because that may be their only way to get said player.
Now, the one thing I have to ask is because it sounds like the Yankees have upped their offer and it sounded like they convinced him on some other things. Like one thing that Soto was looking into was like the prospects and the development and stuff like that. And what could have changed over the past few days? I'm just saying.
I don't think that. I do not think that look. I'm sure Juan Soto wants to know about all the organization's ownership, and they want to know about the prospects and the player development and all that kind of crap. This is coming down to money. This is coming down to money and the mystery of how much he enjoyed playing with the New York Yankees and how much trading for him and getting him in that room really did help in recruiting him. I remember last year I didn't want to trade for Juan Soto. I didn't think the Mets were in position to trade for Juan Soto. I didn't want to give up the pieces it was going to take. I didn't think they even had the pieces that it would take. And I also thought, just blow him away. Just offer him the most money at the end of the year. It'll be interesting if the final story is, bringing him in actually gave the Yankees just a tiny bit of a home field advantage, and that was able to push them over the finish line. So we shall see. I do think we're going to get an answer in the next couple of weeks. And I do promise you, when Soto signs, we will have a Rico Brogna as fast as we can. It's all about timing. Like, if the news breaks at 11 a.m., you're going to have to wait till after the midday show is done with Pete and our afternoon show is done. So I guess you'll hear an instant reaction on the show, like certainly on WFAN, which is my number one job. But if it breaks at night, if it breaks, late afternoon, early evening, late at night, we will certainly give you a Rico Brogna as soon as the news breaks. I do want to mention the Genesis Cabrera signing. I know everybody's loving the fact that it's spelt like Genesis. And so since Kodai Senga's on the Mets now have Senga Genesis. I hate to ruin this for you. It's Genesis. I don't know if anyone really wants to argue with me about this because it's funnier to just have it be Genesis. But they did sign Genesis Cabrera to a minor league deal. I have to admit, we went through the reliever free agents, and I think I mentioned his name rather briefly. I didn't think he would have to settle for a minor league deal. He didn't have the greatest year last year, but it also was reasonable. His strikeout numbers were way down. He had about a mid-3 ERA in Toronto. The year before that was kind of a mixed bag because he was terrible in St. Louis to the point where they DFA'd him. Then he goes to Toronto and pitches really, really well. So I was surprised that Genesis Cabrera had to settle for a one-year deal. But as a lefty reliever on a minor league deal, as a guy that's had some success at the major league level, getting left-handers out, I like the move. Will he be on the major league roster come opening day? I think it's going to be very dependent on what else they do addressing this bullpen. There were a couple of things that jumped out at me about Genesis Cabrera. One thing I like to do with pitchers that they sign, especially relievers, is, what do they throw? How often do they throw it? What's their velocity look like? What pitches have been their most effective? So last year, Genesis Cabrera, and what's unique about Genesis Cabrera for a relief pitcher is that he's really a 5-pitch pitcher, which you rarely see. And when I say a 5-pitch pitcher, like last year, he threw his changeup the 5th most times of any of the pitches he threw, and that was still 8%, which is not a terrible number. He threw his curveball 12% of the time. He threw his four-seamer 18% of the time. He threw his sinker 23% of the time. And his cutter, which was his main pitch last year, he threw 39% of the time. That is not something you see often from a relief pitcher, but he is a converted starter, and so he throws 5 pitches. But what jumped out at me is that cutter, which he threw 39% of the time, was not his most used pitch a year earlier and was not even close to being his most used pitch a year before that when he threw it, not even kidding you, 1% of the time. What I found interesting is that his four-seamer, which was his third most popular pitch last year, he threw it 18% of the time, before that was always his number one go-to pitch. The year before that, he threw it 36% of the time, and the year before that, he threw it 34% of the time. So what's interesting about Cabrera, and actually this kind of stuff gives me hope, he has, over the last 3 years, shown such a great variety in which pitches he's relying on that I wonder, when Jeremy Hefner gets his arms on him, or his hands on him, and they get him into the pitching lab, which pitches they're deeming as, hey, let's focus on the four-seamer. Let's focus on that hard sinker, which you throw 95 miles per hour on average. So it'll be interesting to see how they use him. He's got a lot of different pitches. He's kind of mixed it up over the last few years in terms of how often he throws what. And so I do think there's a lot of potential with him. He's still relatively young. He's 28 years old. He's a lefty. Why not? He's also a fiery guy. There were a few Hennessy's Cabrera incidences over the years. There was one last year in which he pushed a Tampa Bay Ray player right around third base after an extra base hit. There was the incident with the Mets in which he threw at J.D. Davis a few years ago. And then there was a really weird one against the Yankees that I remember where Cabrera, I guess, wanted a new ball. So he throws it towards the Yankee dugout. Aaron Boone gets the ball and is pissed and wallops it to the umpire and then jaws at Hennessy's Cabrera. So, and then I saw an incident where Hennessy's Cabrera is yelling at an umpire and mocking their strike zone. He's a fiery guy. So that's just a little background about him. But on a minor league deal, as a lefty reliever, as a guy who throws 5 different pitches, I'm curious how they're going to harness that. A 28-year-old lefty for a bullpen that is star for left-handed pitching, a fine minor league signing of Hennessy's Cabrera. Let's get to your emails. I've got a few of them that I pulled. Any quick thoughts before we repeat?
Well, before you go through the emails, I just wanted to say one thing. I didn't want to interrupt this podcast because I am sitting in Texas right now, and I had a wonderful evening. I'm right near Global Life, which is where the Texas Rangers play. It is amazing. It's gorgeous. There's so much life here. It's like a party here. There's no baseball game right now. There's nothing going on, but it's still a lot is happening in this little area. And all I could say is if Steve Cohen's vision of what Citi Field is going to turn into is something like this, we're going to have an awesome time in the next couple of years. It's amazing.
Well, keep this in mind. It won't be the next couple of years. It'll be the next couple of decades.
Well, no, not decades. No,
maybe that's too long. But look, I think it'd be great to have Citi Field jumping. I've never been a Globe Life Field, but I believe you. If it's anything like Progressive Field where the Guardians play, or Camden Yards where the Orioles play, or even PNC Park where the Pirates play, or even Yankee Stadium, where the Yankees play, that would be great. So I think it's going to take a while, but yes, we've never had that as Met fans because unfortunately, Shea Stadium and now Citi Field has always just been surrounded by chop shops.
Yeah, well, if you could make, dude, the place I went to was Texas Live, and there's like bar after bar after bar after bar, and then huge TVs and surrounding. It's the atmosphere is great, and there was no baseball going on.
Great.
Just imagine if this is. I swear to God, we have to take a trip here.
There was no baseball going on. There was a basketball game where the Dallas Mavericks just punked the New York Knicks. And by the way, for anyone watching our Rico Live, I appreciate you listening, watching well after midnight. The reason it started so late is I was too busy watching Tyrese Martin and the Brooklyn Nets destroy Kevin Durant and the Phoenix Suns. And I know I'm not supposed to be happy about it because we're tanking, but as a sports fan, I like wins. And other than the Mets, my teams don't win very much, so I certainly enjoy that. But yeah, Pete's out in Texas. He'll be helping to produce the big Giants-Cowboys game, a game you'll hear on WFAN on Thursday, following a very special Evan and Tiki Thanksgiving show. That's right. We're working on Thanksgiving. No one else is. I mean, everybody else is lazy. Everybody.
I mean, hold on. Big 30 minutes. Big 30-minute show you guys are doing.
Hey, I know it's hey, this is a Giant pregame show. What do you want from me? But yes, it's a 30-minute show. So we're not exactly exerting ourselves very much. Let's get to the emails. Of course, the ricob@gmail.com is the way to interact with us. Aaron Miller writes, Evan, I understand your point, and it was the point I made on WFN and I made earlier on here in the Rico about Blake Snell. I understand your point about how Blake Snell doesn't affect the Dodgers' regular season. What you have to remember is getting Snell and Seiroki Sasaki allows them in the postseason to weather an injury to Tyler Glasnow or tired arms from the Japanese pitchers and just throw another quality arm. There's less of a chance of a bullpen game. Teams would love to have that depth. Of course, Aaron, they got better. The Dodgers have more starting pitching depth. Now, they're going to have a six-man rotation. I think that's obvious, especially if they get Roki Sasaki. If they don't, I still think they're going to need a six-man rotation between Clayton Kershaw never being healthy, between Tyler Glasnow never being healthy, between Yoshinobu Yamamoto being used to a six-man rotation. They're going to need that pitching depth. I'm not arguing that their depth isn't better. What I'm arguing is they're going to make the playoffs. They're a loaded team. And so, yeah, they're a bigger threat in the playoffs. Okay, Blake Snell and whoever else may make a playoff start. Their pitching should be better than what it was a year ago. But what are we talking about? 5 innings in the middle of October when the Mets hopefully run into the Dodgers in a playoff series? It's just not as impactful as I think the way we're assuming it. And here's the other thing about the Dodgers. They have shown us they can win 110 games and lose in the divisional series. They've shown us that. So it is possible, to my fellow Met fans, that we are back in the NLCS and not even facing the LA Dodgers. I get they added depth. I just think we have to keep in mind they're a playoff team barring anything, as they've shown us. Jonathan from Kew Gardens writes, it blows my mind that MLB implements the Cohen tax after signing guys like Mark Canha, Eduardo Escobar, and Starling Marte, but the Dodgers get to do what they're doing this offseason with zero reaction from the league. Not that I expect them to actually do anything about it, but I think it's telling. Well, the Cohen tax was a reaction to what they thought and still think Steve Cohen will do spending-wise. And not just Steve Cohen, even though it's called the Cohen tax, but the Dodgers, the Yankees, and every other big market team. I do believe that MLB in the next CBA, which is only a few years away from expiring, will address the deferral stuff. I think they will. But right now, they can't do anything. Just like during the course of an active CBA, they couldn't add a Steve Cohen tax. The timing of it was the CBA ran out and we had that lockout. And Major League Baseball really wanted to address the tax situation going into that 2022 season. By the way, I'm trying to remember now. I guess the Mets did sign all of those guys prior to the lockout because all those guys were signed for the 2022 season, and that's when the CBA expired. But remember, it expired on December 1st. So I'm trying to remember if that was before the expiration or after the expiration. That was the pre-Rico days. So very confusing time for us.
Yeah, no, they definitely all signed everybody. Because I remember there was a big, I'm not sure if COVID was still a thing, but I feel like everything was all done through Zoom. They had the Scott Boras, Max Scherzer interview, and then everything shut down not too long after that.
Gotcha. I do think that they will address what the Dodgers are doing. You just can't address it right now when there's a new CBA negotiation, and God knows we may see a work stoppage. You know, we may get more owners crying poverty, even though they're owned by billionaires and they're not willing to spend money. Mick writes, Evan and Pete, It's frustrating to see the Dodgers make a major move. And again, with the deferred payments, hopefully the Mets will soon have a few financially engineered deals that help build our team. Perhaps the Dodgers will regret it later, as 5 years is a lot for a pitcher turning 32 in December. But for next season, it really helps their rotation. Given the signing and the Angels' agreement with Yusei Kikuchi, 3 years, $63 million, what's your take on the updated contract predictions for other top-tier pitchers or even our own free agents like Sean Manaea and Luis Severino? Pitching sure seems more expensive than ever, so the Mets might as well jump in soon. I think that the Kikuchi signing, and Kikuchi pitched well for Houston. I was not enamored by him at the trade deadline based on his history, just based on how ineffective or average he had been throughout his major league career. But what he did in Houston was really good. And I think that certainly helped him get this 3 year, $63 million deal. I think that contract only helps Luis Severino and Sean Manaea. I think what Blake Snell's contract does is it gives me confidence. Confidence may not be the right word, but belief that Corbin Burnes is getting $200 million. And I think Corbin Burnes is going to get 7 years. And I think there are a lot of people listening who are going to say, Evan, the Mets are crazy to go to that number. They're nuts to pay that amount of money. It is a major, major risk giving that kind of contract out to a starting pitcher. But Corbin Burnes is 2 years younger than Blake Snell. And quite frankly, I think he's more reliable than Blake Snell. So based on the age and based on the reliability, is it crazy to get 2 more years than Blake Snell and instead of $36 million, let's say $38 million? Well, let me get my trusty calculator out. Let's say that's what he gets. 38 times 7 is $266 million. A 7-year, $250 million deal for Corbin Burnes is not crazy. So to answer your question, I think it brings the market up. As far as Sean Manaea is concerned, Sean Manaea is getting more than Yusei Kikuchi. So if Yusei Kikuchi got 3 years at $66 million, I would say that Sean Manaea is certainly possible that he's going to get $28 million a year. And if that's the case, and let's say he gets a 4-year deal, now we're talking about 4 years, $112 million. And maybe I'm cutting him too short. Maybe Manaea is going to do even better than that. The reality is, as much as we don't like giving long-term contracts to starting pitchers or giving them big money, because the Mets showed you this great formula of signing guys on 1-year deals, if you want the best of the market, it's going to cost you. And that's going to be the decision David Stearns has to make.
What if Corbin Burnes, we offer you a 5-year deal, $200 million with a $100 million signing bonus? Would you take that?
I would totally, if Steve Cohen is willing to do it, it's his money. He should try that. He should take the Dodger formula and say, all right, screw it. By the way, can I give you another idea? And I think there's a guy who wrote the email, so I'll read his email so you can hear him say it. But essentially, there's another way to cheat the system. Okay?
Ooh,
you ready?
Give it to me.
I apologize. I can't find the guy's email. I'll go through it. I didn't pull it. I pulled like 7 emails to get to. I didn't get to this one. But basically, it's going to sound really stupid at first, but just hear me out. Give Juan Soto a 20-year contract. So give him a real contract on the 15 years. So let's say you're really willing to give him $48 million over 15 years, which is $720 million. So we're giving you the $720 million, Juan Soto. You're getting that. But we're actually going to sign you to a 20-year contract to bring the CBT down. So hear me out. You're telling Juan Soto it's a 15-year, $780 million deal. We know you're not playing till you're 50, right? And we'll upload or front load a lot of the deal so you'll get a lot of it early. It's the opposite of deferrals. But because we're signing you to such a ridiculously long contract, the way the CBT is determined, at least my understanding, is it averages it out. Well, if we're giving you $720 million, which is the agreed upon number, but we're going to spread that out over 20 years, that brings the CBT down to like $35 million as compared to the $48 million.
Yeah, so I think,
what's wrong with that?
I found Justin was the one who emailed it.
Justin. Just
825 million over 18 years, AAV at 46 million.
isn't it a great idea?
I mean, let's do it. I'm all for. Listen, you have to be creative in this environment. And right now, the way things work, you can be creative. You
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, I mean, there's no rule against the length of the contract. And if you think about it on a smaller scale, the Mets gave Brandon Nimmo more years to stretch it out and bring the CBT down. Same thing with the Yankees and DJ LeMahieu a few years earlier. So, okay, it's a strategy. I'd rather actually give you more years because it brings the average annual salary down. All right, we're going to give you a 50-year contract. You're still we're giving you the money that we're agreeing on, but we're going to call it a 50-year contract. I mean, someone will have to go through the CBA and tell me if there is a full plan to kind of protect from that. But hey, if the Dodgers are going to play this game with deferrals and they're doing nothing wrong, like I've said, then just play the game better. You're a smart guy, Steve Cohen. Negative Dan wrote in about Blake Snell. I want to read this because I love it. The last thing we needed with an unsure bullpen that tends to be dead by June every year, regardless of who we have, is a 5-inning guy every 5-day man. I don't care how good he was in the second half of last year when you know he was going hard to get that new deal somewhere else. He would have had every one of our guys' arms falling off like Pedro Feliciano's was back in the day. You can't have that coming from your quote-unquote ace, which is what he would have been for us. Now it's full steam ahead for Corbin Burnes, which hopefully it has been anyway. He's right. I don't want to take anything away from Blake Snell winning multiple Cy Youngs. He deserves that. But he's a 5-inning pitcher. And if you're going to give a guy $36 million a year, don't you need a little bit more than that? And I say a little bit because I know that no one in baseball anymore is truly an 8-inning pitcher. I get that doesn't exist. But when you compare Blake Snell's innings to what Corbin Burnes can do, there's a huge difference. Again, here are Corbin Burnes' starts and innings over the last 3 years. 33 starts, 202 innings. 32 starts, 193 innings. 32 starts and 194 innings. So do the math on that. That is a 6 1/3 inning average. That's pitching into the 7th inning. Blake Snell never does that. So there is a value to that. And again, Blake Snell's a very good pitcher, and the Dodgers got better, blah, 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 blah. He's a 5-inning pitcher. Daniel Barton writes, guys, first of all, big fan. I was new to following baseball seriously this year at 36 years old, and you caught me up to speed about everything Mets. Well, we appreciate that. You're not going to want to miss our top 20 home runs in the history of the New York Mets. Rico, we have coming up during the holidays. It's actually going to be a 3-part edition. We're very excited about it. It's going to feature the audio, the calls of all of these home runs, and we're going to rank them. So if you're really trying to get back up to date on baseball or learn Mets history, you're going to love that one. That will be debuting right around Christmas. We are going to have the top 20 home runs and then a bunch of honorable mentions. So we're going to end up playing about 30 to 35 home runs. There will be a top 20 list, and there will be other home runs that get honorable mention in the history of the New York Mets. So we all look forward to that.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Will we see any Mo Vaughn home runs on that list?
I mean, Mo Vaughn hit that bomb of a home run off David Wells in the Subway Series. That one was very, very cool. He also hit one off the scoreboard, but no, they're not making it. Unfortunately.
Okay.
I gave it some thought, but they're not making it.
All right.
Anyhow, Daniel Barton goes on to say, I'd like to suggest that the pitcher award for the Mets awards next year, remember we did the Rico Brogna Met Awards next year, should be called the Tom Seaver Award or named after another great Met pitcher. Cy Young is for everyone else. I like that. Yeah, well, if we're going to name the pitcher award, the Cy Young Award for the Mets, which we did earlier after any Met pitcher, there is only one, and that, of course, is the great George Thomas Seaver. Steve Reeves writes, there is no offseason in baseball. Thank you for these podcasts. You're welcome. Like we always say, at least 2 Ricos a week, but most of the time, a lot more than that. I think Pete Alonso should be our number 1 priority in free agency, and here's why. You date an 8. You date an 8. You see a 10 and you go for her along with every other guy at the party. If you lose out on the 10, your 8 is going to be pissed and leave too. And now it's you and your imagination. On the other hand, you treat your 8 like a 10 and she's going to reward you big time. Having said that, slip the 10 your number, because if you're not cheating on your girlfriend, you're cheating on yourself. That is some message by Steve. I love the attempt at an analogy, but Juan Soto and Pete Alonso, to me, and maybe the Mets aren't doing this, or Pete Alonso doesn't want to get serious in negotiations until Juan signs, but I want both of them. This is not a choice. I don't think it should be a choice. First of all, Pete Alonso is not getting nearly the money Juan Soto's getting. Number one. Number two, they play different positions. Number three, if you lose Pete Alonso and replace him with essentially Juan Soto, you still need to replace Pete Alonso. And so now you're thinking, well, how am I replacing Pete Alonso? I've just moved Juan Soto to right field. I guess he's replacing JD Martinez, essentially. If you think about guys on the roster you're replacing, like, to me, and you said this earlier, Pete, the Mets have a lot of work to do. You can't just do one thing. I would love Juan Soto and Pete Alonso. I had an argument. This was one of those emails that I didn't read on the Rico. I literally emailed the guy back, and he was telling me that it would be stupid, and David Stearns would be essentially stupid, for signing Juan Soto and Pete Alonso because he values defense, and talked about how Willy Adames would be such a better option. And I'm like, am I losing my freaking mind? Willy Adames is not even a third baseman. His defensive metrics at shortstop were not even that good last year. Why are we assuming Adames at third, Vientos at first, is defensively better than Vientos at third and Alonso at first? And if it, by the way, better, it may be the same. So I think that defensive argument, give me a freaking break. I just don't buy that. I'm also starting to think Alex Bregman is going to get more than Pete Alonso. So if your thought is, well, just go get Alex Bregman, that's going to be even more expensive. Just give me Pete. Pete Alonso didn't hit a lot of his home runs taking advantage of the Crawford boxes the way Alex Bregman did. I appreciate the analogy, Steve. I would be talking to Pete Alonso right now. I wouldn't be ignoring him. I wouldn't say you re-signing is contingent on Juan Soto. I would want to re-sign both. Obviously, price will dictate that. We will see what the market turns out to be for Pete Alonso, but I have made this very clear in my humble opinion. I want Soto in right. I want Alonso at first base. And if you do that, I'm done offensively. I will fill out the rest of my roster with some of the young pieces that I have. And then obviously you have to worry about the pitching staff. We appreciate all the emails. Thank you very much for interacting with the Rico Brogna. You can do that at thericob@gmail.com. So coming up on the Rico, besides reacting to breaking news when it happens, we are going to have trade week. Next week is trade week. And that means we are going to analyze the trade market for position players and the trade market for pitchers. We're going to group pitchers together, relievers and starting pitchers. We're going to go around all of Major League Baseball. I've already compiled my list of almost every team in baseball and realistic trade targets. I guess they would vary between really realistic and I could see that guy being available. And then we're going to bring in our good friend Big Mac, Chris McMonagle. He does the overnights on WFAN. He's a big Yankee fan. We do this once a year where we create realistic, but probably never going to happen Met Yankee trades. So if you have any trade ideas, whether it's Met Yankee trade ideas, which is just more for fun, or real trade ideas, you can obviously send it over. We'll read a few of those. TheRicoB@gmail.com. So that's coming up next week on the Rico Brogna. We appreciate it. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate you downloading. We appreciate those who wanted to listen or watch live waiting through a Brooklyn Net game. I am curious, for anyone who's a really dedicated Rico fan, like really, I need that Rico Brogna. And you see me tweet, hey, we're going to do Rico after the Nets game. And let's say you're like, man, I got nothing to do tonight. I really want to hear the Rico Brogna tonight. Maybe my email will be read. Did you put on the Nets game and say, let me watch along? Because then I know when it's over, the Rico's going to start. Like, did I enhance the Yes Network's ratings tonight? Probably not. but one can dream. And maybe you fell in love and you think the Nets are a fun team. Anyhow, thanks to Pete Hoffman. He's out in Dallas, Texas. And thanks to all of you for listening, subscribing, and downloading Rico Brogna. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.